Hey, what's going on, guys? Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou just ended, and this is going to be my post-fight recap where we're going to break down the fight. We're going to discuss how Francis Ngannou got exposed by Anthony Joshua, and we're also going to discuss the narratives that are going to come out of this fight for the future of Francis Ngannou, and we're also going to discuss the fighting future of Ngannou. Does he box again? Does he fight in MMA for PFL? What happens with Francis Ngannou next? But let's start off with breaking down the fight. First off, going into this fight, when they were walking out, by the way, they didn't stall for 100 years before the walkout. When they were walking out, man, I was feeling good about the fight. Anthony Joshua, I very rarely have ever seen him. He looked very, very nervous. Now, maybe that's just my imagination, but his body language just looked very nervous. And then Francis Ngannou just looked like he was ready to go. And I wanted Francis Ngannou to win. I admit that I wanted Francis Ngannou to win. I was feeling so good pre-fight. Oh, to have it just snatched away, because Anthony Joshua brutally KO'd him in the second round with the right hand. First round, I thought Ngannou looked pretty decent early. He was landing like a left hook that he wasn't putting full power on. It almost kind of came off as a jab a little bit, but he was landing that. He was landing some jabs, but Joshua was jabbing to the body. He was landing some jabs upstairs as well. And Ngannou was really reacting to all the feints of Anthony Joshua. He was trying to kind of parry him away. As soon as Joshua would even hint at a jab, it was Ngannou already ready to kind of parry it. And I feel like that kind of set up the right hand for Anthony Joshua. In the last minute of the first round, and it was Joshua's round, but it was a competitive round. But Joshua was clearly winning, moving well, landing good shots. But there was nothing crazy landed. And then the last minute of the first round, Anthony Joshua just slams home the right hand, straight right hand, and drops Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou clearly rocked, takes almost the full amount of time to get up. He gets up, and then Joshua kind of gets aggressive as soon as they start to fight back up. You could see Joshua was dialed in. I thought he was nervous in the walkout. He was dialed in the fight. And he immediately almost goes for the kill, similar to what he did in the second round when he actually got the finish. But Ngannou started throwing back kind of wildly, and then it was like Joshua kind of settled in and said, look, I don't want to make a mistake here. And then they make it to the bell. Ngannou makes it to the bell. By the time they got to the bell, Ngannou wasn't like crazy rocked or anything, but you could tell he was like, oh shit, I got clipped badly. And Ngannou, I don't think he's ever been knocked down in his entire combat sports career, and he just got dropped in the first round. It was crazy. Then in the second round it's kind of similar to the start of the first round. Both guys landing shots, Joshua being a little bit more active, jabbing to the body, feinting upstairs quite a bit, landing the jab upstairs. Ngannou landed a couple of those I don't even want to call them left hooks. They were just really short left hooks that didn't have a whole lot of power behind them, but Ngannou doesn't need to put a whole lot of power behind him considering how powerful he is. And one shot that I feel like a lot of people missed in the second round that didn't even get showed on the replay, maybe 30 to 45 seconds before the official knockout, Anthony Joshua landed a clean right hand as Ngannou was coming in, and they clinched up for a second. And because it happened so fast and because it ended with the clinch, I feel like a lot of people missed that shot. They missed that shot, and I honestly think that hurt Ngannou. He didn't get dropped, but I think it hurt him. It caught him clean. Then they separate after the clinch, go back to kind of the same thing again, jab to the body from Joshua, Ngannou biting on all the feints from Joshua. And then comes the ending. Anthony Joshua drops him with the right hand again. Ngannou clearly hurt again. Referee gives him a 10 count. He gets back up. They start to fight back up. As soon as they start to fight back up, Anthony Joshua went out there for the kill. Just ran across. Boom. Another straight right hand. And just slept Francis Ngannou badly. Some people even said, fold it like a lawn chair. And I understand the picture of him and Stipe kind of do look similar. But the reason you say Stipe Miocic got folded like a lawn chair is because his leg got completely bent behind him. The bottom of his foot was touching his back. Ngannou's foot was still flat on the ground. I know that's arguing, very minute details, but I just think it's so weird. People are trolling me yeah, Ngannou got folded like a lawn chair just like Stipe. Okay, their upper bodies fell similarly in a fight, in a sport where people get knocked out. They both ended up on their back with their head kind of tilted back. I don't get it. I understand they're both their knees are bent. Either way, we're getting into too many details there. Either way, it was a brutal KO by Anthony Joshua. And I know Dana White had a shit-eating grin on his face. He watched this. He watched this for sure. He was watching live. I know Chael Sonnen was pleasuring himself 100%. He had his Dana White, he had his Dana White Dune popcorn bucket on hand for that Francis Ngannou KO. And then immediately in the aftermath, I already saw it in my live stream. I saw it on Twitter. The UFC shills, the Dana White sycophants just came out in droves. Francis Ngannou's career is over. Francis Ngannou's irrelevant. Francis Ngannou's a bum. And one of the narratives I've already heard is, yeah, I told you Tyson Fury didn't take him seriously. He had no business being in there with Tyson Fury. He got lucky because Tyson Fury, didn't train properly for him. I mean, can you make enough excuses for the performance that Ngannou had against Tyson Fury? At the end of the day, Francis Ngannou stepped in there with one of the best boxers in the world, dropped him, and arguably beat him. I believe he should have beat him on the scorecards. He got robbed by the judges, okay? So I get it. You want to say, oh, Tyson Fury this, Tyson Fury that. He didn't train. He was out of shape. Tyson Fury knew what he signed up for, and Tyson Fury lost to Francis Ngannou. And Francis Ngannou went out there and put on a masterful performance against Tyson Fury. And then he stepped in against Anthony Joshua, who was one of the best heavyweight boxers in the world, and he got flatlined. And people are already saying, like, he should have stayed with the UFC, which almost makes absolutely no sense. And I'm going to break that down for you because people are somehow twisting themselves into pretzels to say this knockout for Francis Ngannou somehow makes him a bum, but also makes him, makes the decision to leave the UFC a bad decision, which makes absolutely no logical sense in any world, in any universe. It makes absolutely no sense because let me break this down for you. Francis Ngannou got brutally chinned by Anthony Joshua in the second round, okay? How much did he get paid for that? I wonder. Well, it's being reported that he got paid $20 million. That's probably not including sponsors and part of the pay-per-view cut, okay? So there's a good possibility Francis Ngannou makes $30 million for this fight, okay? There's a good chance, $25 million, $30 million. But let's just stick with the number that we know, and it's not 100% confirmed, but it's being widely reported for $20 million. Well, $20 million, oh, Joey, that's not really that much. Let me give you some numbers real quick. UFC 229 back in 2018. I know that was many years ago. Biggest UFC pay-per-view of all time. Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov sold over 2 million pay-per-view buys. You know what Conor McGregor's guaranteed purse for that was? It was $3 million. He got paid $3 million for that. Let's put that in retrospect. Even if you want to adjust for inflation, let's double it. Let's make it $6 million. He got paid $6 million for that, adjusted for inflation, which I highly compensated for. It's not actually $6 million adjusted for inflation, but let's just say it is. He got paid $3 million for the biggest UFC pay-per-view of all time. Okay, let's look at Conor's purse versus Eddie Alvarez when he fought for the double championship opportunity against Eddie Alvarez, UFC 205, Madison Square Garden, one of the biggest cards of all time, high-selling pay-per-view as well. He made $6 to $7 million in his purse for that fight. Okay, all right, well, that's Conor McGregor, the biggest star. But nobody is a Conor McGregor in the UFC. Francis Ngannou certainly isn't a Conor McGregor in the UFC based on star power. So let's look at a more recent example because both those examples are kind of old. We're looking back at 2018, 2016. I don't want to get in a time machine to go back and look at that, but I still thought that was interesting for context considering what a star Conor McGregor is, what a draw Conor McGregor is. Let's look at Alexander Volkanovski. Let's look at his disclosed purse for UFC 298, a dominant champion, by no means a draw, by no means a star, but a dominant champion, an elite champion who's been around for a while, who's beat a lot of very elite guys and defended his belt. How much did he get paid for UFC 298 against Ilia Topuria? You're probably wondering what the answer to that is. $750,000. $750,000 is how much Alexander Volkanovski got paid to get brutally chinned by Ilia Topuria at UFC 298. Yeah, Francis Ngannou made a massive mistake. Volkanovski made less than Francis Ngannou made in one night. Made less than 1/20th of the amount Francis Ngannou got paid to get flatlined by Anthony Joshua. I guarantee Francis Ngannou made tonight more than Alexander Volkanovski made in his entire UFC career. Think about how crazy that is. I very highly doubt, and I'll try to look into this, but the numbers aren't always released. It was in California. Even if Volkanovski made $1 million for every fight, I don't think he doesn't even have 20 fights in the UFC. I'm pretty sure. I don't have that right in front of me. I didn't plan to say that, but I'm just saying he's not making $1 million a fight. So Francis Ngannou made more in one night than the greatest of all time at featherweight, made it his entire UFC career. Please tell me more how Francis Ngannou made a mistake. One fight, $20 million, potentially more with all the other escalations and sponsorships and stuff like that and gifts from Saudi Arabia. Francis Ngannou's last purse with the UFC was $600,000. $600,000. And I know people are going to comment down below and say, Joey, you're leaving out the fact that Dana White and the UFC wanted to renegotiate and they were going to pay Francis Ngannou $9 million and he was going to fight John Jones and there was going to be pay-per-view points. For some reason, a lot of fans who worship Dana White and the UFC blindly because they love the sport and they love the product the UFC puts out, they can't actually use critical thinking skills and figure out things. Pay-per-view points for Francis Ngannou versus John Jones, with rough math from information and numbers we have that were released by the UFC in the antitrust lawsuit, you're looking at potentially another $1 to $1.5 million for Francis Ngannou against John Jones, okay, in pay-per-view points, on top of his $9 million purse. Francis Ngannou signed a mega deal with PFL. And you could say, and I know people are already going to be saying, he's going to be irrelevant in PFL. I almost said pay-per-view. He's going to be irrelevant in PFL. He's going to be irrelevant. He's not going to sell any pay-per-view buys. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter because he's guaranteed a high contract and a high purse from PFL. And then on top of that, he gets, I believe it's a 50% cut of the pay-per-view sales. So I can't remember what the exact numbers are because I did this math before in a very high detailed video on Francis Ngannou's contract. Francis Ngannou would have to sell something like 100 or 200,000 pay-per-view buys to make almost the same amount of money as he would make versus John Jones in just pay-per-view points. And just pay-per-view points we're talking here, not flat out purse. If that sold over 1 million pay-per-view buys, something along those lines. I don't remember the exact numbers. I didn't do them before I did this video. I broke it down in a previous video. And at the end of the day, it does not matter because we're not even factoring in the fact that he made 10 to 15 million versus Tyson Fury in the last boxing match. 10 to 15 million, but let's say 10 million because that's the lower number. Let's just stay with that. He made 30 million in 2 fights. 30 million in 2 fights. That's more than 90% of the UFC roster has made in their entire UFC careers combined. So take any fighter on the roster, combine their career earnings for their entire UFC career, it's still not as much as Francis Ngannou made in 2 boxing matches. 2 boxing matches. That is outright craziness. And I know you have to take into account that Francis Ngannou did get chinned. There's going to be people saying his chin's gone, it's deteriorated, he's done. I was sad when Francis Ngannou got knocked out. I was rooting for Francis Ngannou. And I admitted that. I was emotionally attached to this fight. I even said in my prediction video, I said this is a biased pick because I desperately want Francis Ngannou to win. The reason I wanted Francis Ngannou to win is because he tried to manage his dreams and his career on his own terms. He stood up against an entity that takes advantage of fighters. Okay? He stood up against them. And even though it made logical sense that it would work out, it wasn't going to blow up in his face, the fact that he did what he did was just, it was just crazy to see a guy fight to achieve his dreams and then be able to do it. And to see the MMA community rally against him, in the capacity that they did, because they take their marching orders from Dana White and Chael Sonnen and all the other MMA pundits. And then there's a lot of the MMA community, whether it's the Twitter community or the MMA content creator community, who went against Francis Ngannou and said, Francis fumbled the bag, all because they were pissed off because they weren't getting John Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Well, just take it from Dana White. Dana White said, it wouldn't have been any different. It wouldn't have been any different than John Jones versus Cyril Gane. Take it from Dana White. You were mad that you didn't get Francis Ngannou versus John Jones, and that's why you wanted to take it out on Francis Ngannou. But also, you were just, a sycophant for Dana White, okay? You take your marching orders from him, and that's why you went against Francis Ngannou. So, excuse me for seeing a guy who's done absolutely nothing wrong. Super likable, seems like a good person. We have no evidence or any anecdotal evidence that Francis Ngannou is a bad guy by any means. And you know what? I want to cheer for him to have a good career in whatever he goes into. You know, if he decides to quit combat sports and start a, investment firm, I'll be rooting for Ngannou. But maybe that's just the way I'm built. I root for everybody's success. There's very few people, and there has to be specific reasons why. There's very few people that I'm rooting for their downfall. It almost doesn't exist for me. I want some guys to lose certain fights and whatnot, but people were actively wishing that Francis Ngannou was going to go broke. They were actively wishing for Francis Ngannou to not have any success post-UFC, all because a multi-billion-dollar corporation told them so. That is why. Think about how disturbing that is. A multi-billion-dollar organization was pissed at a fighter because, you know what, I want to go box. I think I can go make more money boxing. Dana White said, Francis thinks there's all this money in boxing. I disagree. Well, guess who was right? Francis Ngannou was right. He made $30 million in 2 fights. 2 boxing matches, $30 million. And guess what? Getting KO'd doesn't matter. I was sad. I was sad that Francis lost. It doesn't matter. He dared to be great. He is an inspiration, and guess what? He's a trailblazer for the sport. There are so many fighters who are going to get bigger paychecks because of what Francis Ngannou did. He set an example. He said, I love using this analogy, the Bug's Life analogy. Francis Ngannou is Flick from A Bug's Life, and Dana White is Hopper. We can't let one stand up because then they all might stand up, and if they all stand up, there goes our way of life. Francis Ngannou was that guy. He did that. Then he went out there and ventured into a sport against 2 of the best in that sport, while Francis Ngannou had never even competed there, because it was a dream of his. He went out there, won the first match against the heavyweight champ, and got brutally robbed on the judges' scorecards. Then he goes in against one of the other best heavyweight boxers and gets flatlined. And gets absolutely flatlined, but guess what? It doesn't matter. He achieved his dreams. Now, I don't know what he does from here. Does he continue to try to box and make a name for himself in boxing, or does he go to PFL? I think he should go to PFL. In a selfish way, I'm happy for Ngannou. In a selfish way, I'm happy that Ngannou lost. In a way. I wanted him to win. I would take that all day. I want to see him in MMA. And the same people that have been saying how long has it been now? I lost track. When did he fight Gane? That was UFC 270. Was that 2022? That was 2022, I believe. That's craziness. Yeah, because last year was when we got Jon Jones and Ngannou, or Jon Jones Gane, last March. Yeah, it was January 2022 when Ngannou took on Gane. Those same people who are UFC shills have been saying, Francis is irrelevant. That's all I've seen people talking about on Twitter for the last 48 hours. I searched on YouTube Francis Ngannou, Anthony Joshua live streams. It was endless. I couldn't even get through them all. There was thousands of them. Thousands of people doing live reactions to it. All the MMA websites are covering it. That narrative is dead. He took a shot at his dreams. He fought 2 of the best in the world, and he set up his family with generational wealth, all with the backup plan that he can now go to PFL and still get paid more fighting lesser competition in PFL than he would have in the UFC. So, round of applause for Francis Ngannou. He may have got KO'd, and maybe his chin's gone after that. It was tough seeing him go down 3 times. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Francis Ngannou took very little damage throughout his MMA career. He took some against Stipe in the first fight, took a little bit in the second fight against Stipe. But at the end of the day, this was the first time that Francis really took any severe damage. Take some time off, return, and even if he gets KO'd in the rest of his MMA fights, he's still a winner here. He's still a winner, and his name will go down in history. He will never be forgotten by the MMA community. He got the MMA community a win against Tyson Fury, which we've desperately wanted for years, a win for MMA against boxing. And at the end of the day also, and I don't want to hang my hat on this narrative because I think it's kind of corny. At the end of the day, Francis Ngannou went to his sport. Francis Ngannou would kill Anthony Joshua in a real fight. Francis Ngannou would kill Tyson Fury in a real fight. That's just facts. So my guess is Francis is going to take some time off, probably come back in PFL against Renan Ferreira, which is no easy task. By the way, I'm compelled by that fight. I think a lot of people will be tuning in for that fight as well. Does he get chin there? Maybe. And at the end of the day, PFL would be the loser there. I think more people are going to be interested in Francis Ngannou's PFL debut, even with a loss to Anthony Joshua. I think PFL won here. To be honest, people were saying, oh, this is a loss for PFL, him getting KO'd by Anthony Joshua. There's no shame. Where was the shame for Conor McGregor when he got finished by an old Floyd Mayweather? An old, undersized Floyd Mayweather toyed with Conor McGregor and finished him. I know it was in the later rounds, but still, where was the shame in that? There was no shame in that. He went to another sport. So there's no shame in him losing to Anthony Joshua, one of the best in the world. The narratives that are going to come out saying he's irrelevant, he never belonged in boxing. Even Anthony Joshua said, you should stick to boxing. You can beat a lot of these guys. I'm not familiar with the boxing landscape, so I don't know. I don't know how Francis Ngannou matches up with a lot of the other boxers. I don't even know any of the other boxers for the most part. But at the end of the day, I hope Francis Ngannou goes to the PFL. I hope Francis Ngannou competes in MMA. I will be watching. I will be ordering the pay-per-views. I will be covering the PFL. And Francis Ngannou made me order boxing pay-per-views, something I thought I would never do. And I enjoyed them. I had fun. The anticipation was amazing. I was super excited for Ngannou Joshua. It was a letdown. They got KO'd. But at the end of the day, he went out there and dared to be great. I think he deserves credit for that. And I think all these narratives about him being irrelevant, just not true. About him making a mistake, leaving the UFC, just not true. Ask Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski's lost 3 out of his last 4. In his last 2, got brutally chinned. And his entire UFC career did not make as much as Francis Ngannou made just tonight in the last 24 hours. Think about that. Feel bad for Alexander Volkanovski, which is absolutely just criminal even saying that. I feel bad even saying that about Volkanovski because it's horrible, you know, the level of fighter that he is, one of the greatest of all time. But that's just facts. That's just facts. So Ngannou dared to be great. He got KO'd by Anthony Joshua. No shame in that. I think he can still box in the future. He obviously has that lucrative deal with PFL lined up that he can always fall back on. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I know Chael Sonnen's pleasuring himself to the brutal KO of Francis Ngannou. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.